were pulling with the right hand and the left hand, and a 12-foot heavy over your wrist, it never standing. But when she's crossed, you see, she's well balanced.
They came in all sizes, from what they would refer to as wee cots, which would be used for passenger traffic. Then they would talk about having a lump of a cot, which would probably carry a donkey and cart, or bring a small animal out to the market and bring home their bags of flour and whatever they needed. And then they had bigger cots, which would carry maybe horses and carts, and 2 or 3 horses maybe in carts, and bring their larger animals out to the market. They were, of course, a very necessary commodity, was the cot or the boat round the islands. You just couldn't get from your island without one. So every family had their own cot. I was born and raised on Lisnaskea Island here, as had my father before me. In fact, I am the 3rd generation of my family to live here. Of course, living on an island meant that when I was going to school, that we had to travel across the water by boat. There was a ferryman employed in the locality, James Rooney was his name, and he ferried us across to the mainland in the mornings, practically regardless of the weather. Some very stormy mornings, sometimes with ice on the water. He might have to break his way through it, fog. And then we had to walk across fields to the school. Well, to a young schoolboy it seemed a long distance, but probably it was only about a mile or less than a mile through the fields. And then in the winter time the water would rise, and the fields that we would be travelling across would become flooded. And we had to come then to Kilmore Quay and walk round by the road to the school, which was much longer distance. When the water would freeze up during the winter time, there was various means used of breaking through it, or when it would get too strong maybe to break it, means of travelling across it. One man who lived quite convenient to us here, William Rooney, on Lisnaskea Island, he had a little cot and he put wheels on it. And he could get up and sit in the cot and use a pitchfork, and he could fly around the loch on it. A lot of people, I suppose, expect the island people to have been fishermen, but by and large they weren't. I suppose most families would catch some fish for their own use, but by and large they weren't fishermen. They were farmers. They had reasonable holdings, and they would have farmed them in much the same way as people on the mainland. Well, in my childhood days, people would say, what games did you play and such? You were on an island and there wouldn't be many other children to play with you. We did play games, certainly, and had a fair amount of leisure time. But I can never remember the day when we weren't doing some work, helping out on the farm, when we come home in the evenings from school and have our dinner. There would be little chores for us to do, maybe feed the calves, drive in the cows later on for to have them milked, and even help to milk them. I had one sister who was milking cows from 5-year-old. I'd been the baby of the family. I was much, much older than that when I started to milk cows. But things like that, general, we were always working. Haymaking season, we would be out with our rake and fork helping to gather up the hay. From very small, very young. Lough Erne, of course, divides Fermanagh completely in two. So in this particular locality we have what we call the Derry Lynn side of the loch and the Lisnaskea side of the loch. They were completely separated by the water until in the early 1930s, when what we refer to as the new bridges were built, which were a link between Derry Lynn and Lisnaskea. Lisnaskea, of course, was the nearest town for the people from this area here, from the islands round here. They would have went to Lisnaskea as their market town, both to sell their produce and, of course, buy the goods which they needed, the essentials.
Well, I was reared in Derry Lynn, and when I grew up, I come to a fair, you see, with my father to Lisnaskea, and we come to sell calves, you see. And we'd have to start off about 5 o'clock in the morning, because it's about 9 miles to our place in Derry Lynn. And the calves would be running in and out through the gaps, you see, and I was young, and other neighbours would be there, so there'd be a whole drift of us coming, you know. So we would arrive there at the ferry cart at Carthistian. That would have been the quay then. And then we arrived over then at Corradiller when the animals were put on the cart and then unloaded on the Lisnaskea side. And we would arrive then to the fair, and there'd be dealers along the road and be buying the cattle or bidding for them, you know, differently. And sometimes then you wouldn't sell until you come to the fair green. And other times then people sold them on the street. There was cattle on the street on fair day, and also pigs on the street on a fair day. And I would have been talking to a lot of old men, you see, about the Highland Fairs. And I remember the Highland Fairs being on a May Day or on Halloween Day. There was a man in the Derry Lynn area, well, he's not too long dead, a man that I would have known well, and he was in the Highland Fair, and he wanted to get the best money, you see, and of course the farmer wanted to get the best man. So this was at May Day, you see, and he asked him what he could shear. That was to cut corn with a hook. Oh, he said he could cut 40 stook. Well, a good man wouldn't cut more than 20 stook. So anyway, when the boys in the country heard about what he said, and he told it himself, they caught him 40 stooks.
Really didn't know what to eat next. They weren't used to other foods, and this is really what led up to the trouble and the famine and people dying under hedgerows. And this is where the workhouse came in. Workhouses were run rather like a hospital. There was the clerk to the governors. Now, he was the top man. He sat in the administration building, and he sorted out the finances. The workhouse master received £12, 10 shillings. Under him came people like the matron, the nurse, the chaplain, the schoolmaster. Doubtless there were cooks and doorkeepers and everything else. But he was the top man in his own workhouse. If you were a destitute married couple in Lisnaskea, you applied to the Board of Guardians to be taken into the workhouse. And if you'd been of good character and always lived here, you probably would get in. But once you came up those steps, you parted forever. Women to one side, men to the other. You might see your other half at meal times fleetingly, but never again would you get a chance to hold hands or pass an endearment or even say a last goodbye. Now, they were reasonably well fed in the workhouse. I've got here a copy of the extracts of the minutes book of the Lisnaskea Board of Guardians for the 1st of August, 1846. Resolved that the following change in the dietary be made, that on 2 days in a week the paupers get rice for dinner, molasses and sweet milk. Adult paupers, 7 ounces of rice boiled and mixed afterwards with 1½ naggins of sweet milk and 1 ounce of molasses. Now, this is the old gruel pot. It used to sit on the other side of that wall in the kitchen, but we rescued it. And you can imagine the 400 weight of maize porridge, 400 gallons of water, soaking overnight, heated up, stirred, and served up to the paupers, who would have served the whole workhouse, spoon by spoon, and doubtless there was some scrapings at the bottom of the pot.
There were a number of works, of course, started up during the famine years, in particular road making. And I have often heard it told that out round the Derry Lynn side, particularly between the village of Derry Lynn and the loch, that a number of roads were made during the famine years to give employment. And the men working on these roads got 6pence a day. But I heard of a man who went to his work every day with a turf rolled up in a piece of paper so that his workmates would think he had some lunch with him. But people from the mainland who were completely destitute and had nothing would come into the islands for to get fed. And I heard one story told that in Martin's in Innistork, when the number of callers, this would be when the famine was starting to recede, the number of callers had dwindled to 13. They began to get very lonesome.
I remember my first daily. I went with my uncle James to a neighbour's house, and he was very great with his family, and he was always smoking his pipe. And at tea time, he always filled 2 pipes to have them ready to smoke. I don't know did they smoke anymore or not. But when I went into the house, I sat in the corner, and it was a mud wall house, and there was a flag floor, and it was lovely and clean, whitewashed walls, and the men all around the fire, and a big hearth fire, you see, were smoking their pipes.
Some of the neighbours came, neighbours who helped my father at the hay, or at the corn, or at flax pulling, or something like that.
I remember ladies coming to our house at home, and they always had their lace with them, and different houses like that. And they always said that the girls were doing the lace, you see, they were trained to do it to make money, you see, to have a fortune, to get married.
I'm collecting songs and stories, and this area, the Knox, which is near Lisnaskea, is rich in that tradition. There was a poet named Michael McManus, or better known as Michael Mac. He was a shrewd reader of character, and this is evident by a song, The Tinker of Tyrone. The Tinker of Tyrone tells the story of a travelling man who came to this area and visited a family named McCormick's, better known as the Kings, and how they played host to him.
Custom was in olden times, Irish kings had sway, keep the beef a boiling for the hungry on the way. In their mountain palace, keep the news a going, the heart himself for man is sure the stinker from Tyrone.
There've been some dances, an old custom, you see, in the country, and it's fairly well known. Of course, it has died out now, but I try to keep these things alive, you know. And the dance that in country houses at parties or weddings,